Hey guys, I'm Grit. What? He didn't say Grit here. What do we do now? I don't know, click like, okay. On this video I will be showing you the progress I made before finishing the first playable demo to get feedback from the game. There are so many things I worked on this month, I think mostly because the additions were just refinements of previous things I already learned, rather than having to learn while making things, like on the previous months. I did my best to edit down all the game work I recorded behind the scenes. And if I thought on the previous video 5 hours of footage was a lot, this time just the first week had 5 hours of me working on things. So apart from all the fun I had removing a lot of content, I tried my best to leave only the important things in an interesting way on the video. You can see how the game progressed while I was working on the editor window, both the camera view of the world as well as the hierarchy and other work windows of Unity. On the first update of this month, I was tweaking the values of the character controller that controls the guy. I increased the max speed as well as the turning values to compensate for the turning speed so the guy wouldn't drift like crazy, like in the previous update.
Deja vu, I just been in this place before. Higher on the street and I know it's my time to go.
Apart from fixing issues, I worked on slight improvements and changes. For example, here you can see me testing the 10 levels of speed for the guy. You can see how it both updates the guy's speed and the animation speed while moving, as well as correctly changing the UI yellow stat icons.
I swear I'm hitting the floor. I could swear that my stomach just sunk a meter. I'll be dead if I take any more. You make me feel kind of bad.
I also did some work on the guy's different animations. This is how different bodies change value over time, allowing me to make basic animations with the spheres of the body. For now, all of these animations are just placeholders that will change when I implement different models in the future. After making animations, I worked on the animator for the body that controls these animations. In the animator, you are able to change the animation speed depending on the speed stat value of the guy. This allows that the guy, when running faster or slower, will move faster or slower, making it both more realistic but also a way for the player to know, just by looking at the enemy, if this one is a high or a slow speed stat. So this tells you if you can run away from the enemy or you are gonna have to fight it. In this update, I also started ideating and testing a possibility of having a grid tile style environment that will allow the guy to dig and modify the terrain underneath. These holes can get filled with water when it's raining, making puddles of water and possibly swimming pools in which we can swim. So first, I started working on the water prefab for the world. Because I wanted the water not to be just a transparent cube and be interactive and respond to the guy's movement when the guy is in it, I decided to work on a particle emitter that would generate water cubes floating on the water. At this time I didn't know much about particle emitters, so most of the work in the footage I have is me testing and changing values to the particles until I managed to come up with something that will behave remotely like water. After iterating a lot, I decided to stop with a very basic looking water asset to start implementing this in the ground tile system. To do this, I thought of having different prefab assets that will have different levels of depth. When making a hole, the idea would be to animate some dirt cubes being removed, and once we finish digging, these will change the tile to the next level depth by changing the prefab asset. I think I ended up having 3 levels of depth to start with, as you can see in the time lapse. Once I made the tiles, I started checking how the water prefab could be combined and be part of the prefab tile, to be able to have water tiles if this one will be filled of water. After pausing the development of the tile dig system, since it would have required a lot of work and it wasn't vital for this stage of the game's development, I decided to start working on something entirely different. So I started finally working on the NPCs and AI behavior of the enemies. I waited to work on the NPCs this long since I wanted them to behave and have the same animations as our guy. I started by first using the following ball from the previous versions and working just on the chasing behavior. After this, I imported and copied the body and animations of our ball guy. I decided to have all the basic NPC guys be the same, with the visuals being the only thing that will be different. I will have to make a different visual asset as well as animations for each new different NPC. This will allow me to scale the asset to make easy multiple NPCs without having to develop all the behavior for each one. This will help me to carry the improvements to all the NPCs enemies faster. As I said before, I started working on the ball guy NPC. I copied the default idling behavior and created a combat smash mode, or attack mode, based on the environment smashing behavior. When the guy will enter this fight mode, the NPC will continue attacking until the target will be removed. If the target gets too far and it's not in smashing distance, the NPC will chase the target to continue the attack behavior. This will be the same as with rocks and trees like before, the only difference being that the rocks and trees don't move and don't attack back. A non-visual important change that I made was the creation of teams or groups of enemies. There would be 3 teams plus our player to start with. NPCs from the same team will not attack each other and will target NPCs from the other teams. This was so there could be groups of enemies that will not fight among themselves and potentially gang up on someone else. Once I had the NPC chasing, I tested changing the speeds and having multiple NPCs to work the issues this may cause. NPC guys will attack a target if this one enters the notice area and is in direct line of sight. Here you can see how they don't attack each other and they all chase the guy when it gets noticed. This then will enter an attack loop, making the NPC first check if the target is on range. If it's not on range, it will get closer until it is finally on range. Every time it gets a hit, then it will check if the target is still there, and continue until the target dies and gets removed. After this, I had some game issues and I fixed some bugs like the NPCs floating and misbehaving when ganging up on someone. On this update, I kept working on the combat interactions. Here I was working on implementing the animation speed synchronization with smash animations like we had in the running animations when moving. That was a mouthful. To show it clear, the NPC here is defaulted to a 5 speed animation value, while I changed the speed value of the blue guy. You can see how the animation starts being very slow and speed up when the speed value goes up. When reaching the maximum speed, you can see how the guy is very fast, maybe too much. I left it this way for the demo to be able to experiment with the different energy levels and have fun being overpowered. Later on in the game we will have a limited amount of energy to expend, so if the person wants to be overpowered, it's gonna have to compromise in some other stat. This also will allow the guy to run away from enemies if we prefer to expend the energy in the speed rather than the strength, and do not want to constantly be fighting when we are exploring. I decided to leave the minigame animations to the same speed for now because this will make it hard to play and unbalance the interactions in social mode. Once I had the animations working for the NPC, I made the basic life manager that will keep the track of the life of the guy. When the health reaches 0, the player will faint and put the guy in a dead stage. I made visual indicators to show that the guy was defeated by making a new emotion state with the crow's eyes, as well as a new collapse animation to trigger when being defeated. For the eyes, I modified the eyebrows from the previous existing sad emotion. First I made the dead or faint eyes and then I made the angry eyes by just turning the eyebrows. Until now the emotions were only normal and sad. I added an angry emotion to display when entering attack mode. For now, the only visual change to this mode was the change on the eyes of the guy. Because I had planned that enemies will spawn in and out of different realities, the worlds that we are traveling to, I started making spot animations with yellow particle emitters. These emitters will trigger when an NPC spawns in the world or when it gets defeated and fades out of the world. I created a basic upward stream particle emitter to make the effect of fading out of the world. I also created, so the effect will be a bit more interesting, a small particle explosion that will play and will start the other fading emitter. Here you can see how all the additions will work together when an enemy gets defeated. I continued working on the combat with multiple NPCs, as well as working with the health display bar. You can see in this test how the NPCs will attack the blue guy, and if they receive damage, the health bar will show how much health they have left. As a first glance, you could think that the blue guy is a bit on a disadvantage here, but because the guy still doesn't have the combat manager implemented, he doesn't receive damage yet, so it's not a very fair fight for the grey guys. After the match ended, they all reported him from cheating. At this point, since I had most of the combat figured out, I was working here on rebalancing the damage values depending on the strength variables. I was testing the values in both NPC combat as well as smashing objects. So we could say that at this point I was mostly done with developing all the assets, and I was ready to actually start making the game. You know, the thing that is playable and fun for the player. This week was the last week I could work on the game because I have to travel for vacation. Because I wanted to have a first playable demo at this time, I finally decided to stop improving the technical aspects of the game and actually start working on the progression and combat parts of the game. Until now I was mostly focusing on the technical parts and ideating to make sure that later on I wouldn't have to go back to the drawing board because I forgot to think about something. So, the first thing I implemented this week was the health manager for our blue guy. Now, as you can see, the guy gets hit like enemies can, making our world link bar go down. The world link is basically the guy's health, with the difference being that if we get defeated, the consequences will be that we return to our home world and we'll have to recover, being punished with game time and maybe dropping an energy cube as an additional punishment sometimes. Also, you can see how I added small animations with the previous particles to increase the energy level of the guy by dropping a cube into him when leveling up. This was both for a visual improvement but also so the player cannot spam and change values on the fly, The slowness of the animation gives it importance and sense of achievement when we actually end up leveling up. Once I have the ball guy fully defined and working with basic animations, I decided to create the second NPC. Finally, I had someone else to work on. The cube guy was ideated back with the original concept art when creating the game. To make this, I just needed to make a new body and new animations while keeping all the existing behavior of the previous NPC. I also had to create a new walking and running animations as well as a basic idling and fighting idle stand. Since this time I did not have to learn how to make the different bodies or animations, this was done much faster than the original ball guy took me to make. The hardest part of making this NPC was to come up with 4 different smashing animations, since it has no hands or legs and you have to think of creative ways of moving. I decided to use his body as the primary attack and the tail as a whip, by turning and swinging it around. The last animation I made was the collapse animation when being defeated. Because I couldn't still make it very obvious by just looking at the enemies what stat level these ones were on, I decided to have a small panel that would show the levels by clicking on the enemies to decide if it would be a good idea to fight or to avoid the enemy. This panel will follow the NPC and always face the camera, but they will be in the world rather than being an overlay on the screen, so they can be covered and hidden by other objects in the world, like trees. Using the previously implemented team groups, the cube guy would be on a separate team from the ball guys. This would make the ball NPC and the cube NPCs to target each other and also target the player. These mechanics were decided to have a more dynamic world with the NPCs interacting with each other and feel more natural and alive than it would otherwise. This could generate random fights in different teams while these spawn in the world in the same reality, making the gameplay exploration a bit more interesting and random. Once the basic NPCs were created, it was time to start creating the realities to put them on. I decided to create another material to have a bit more variety when farming loot to create objects, as well as more variety on the objects populating these worlds. Up until now, there were only stone, wood and plant cubes, So I decided to create a new material, the glass cube. These cubes will spawn from crystals that will be like previous rocks with a different look. For now, all you could do with it will be to smash them and collect the materials like the previous objects. After making the crystal prefab asset, I started recoloring the rock assets to make more variety and be able to put them in different environments. The change was done only to the looks of the rock, but the smashing behavior and the loot remained the same. I also created additional tree prefabs out of the previously finished oak tree that I made on the previous update. You can see how the loot behavior and the transparency behavior was kept from the original prefab and was working in these ones as well. The only changes to the trees were done to the looks, as well as the smashing distance in order to match the models. This will keep the guy on the intended range, avoiding it to go through the object mesh and break the illusion for the player. On this update, I spent a lot of time trying to make a way of saving the state of the scene so the world will keep the objects that we will craft in it. But after many hours and research, I had to compromise. Since I couldn't create a way of retaining our home world, I had to create a starting world with the basic training objects I created, so the player will be able to level up for now. The crafting system was working, the only issue was once you leave the world, everything will reset, so there's not really any point of crafting. Apart from the new homeworld with the training objects, the other addition was to the UI and the feedback of the icons. When training, so the player would understand that the level is going up, a grey plus sign pops up both in the training down left button when the menu is hidden, as well as a plus icon on the stat that we are training when the menu is open. You can see how I created the new bed interactable object. This will allow us to recover the health and continue exploring after fighting enemies. With the bed, I also have now a new emotion state of sleeping that will trigger the collapse animation together with the sleeping eyes. On the same way, a green plus sign will appear when we are gaining world link, aka health, next to the top left guy button icon. The guy will gain by default a bit of health over time just for being on the home world, but if we want to speed up the process, we can now sleep as well, so we recover faster and we can go exploring again. The intent of the game is to be a daily routine based game, so the player keeps engaged with the guy and keeps coming back, having a gameplay loop that is spread during the day rather than in small sessions. Because I couldn't implement the saving mechanics, I had to balance the time to be compatible with short sessions when testing the demo, by having the life recovery value and the leveling up be much faster than it will be in the final game. Actually, at this point I already created the other worlds to travel to, as well as the basic travel mechanics and user interface that will allow the guide to change the scenes and spawn in other realities. In this demo, I had time to only make the placeholder worlds of the forest reality. The progression was also implemented. In order to progress and not travel to realities with stronger enemies, the travel system was tied to the energy level of the guy. For now, there is only 3 world levels. Each world level will have multiple worlds with different environments but with similar enemy level NPCs. To add replayability, NPCs will be able to despawn and spawn randomly in the world that you are traveling to, adding a bit of urgency to the time we can stay in another world, since the only way our guy can recover the health back is to go back in our home world and sleep. Because the saving issue I mentioned before, I created 2 demo alpha builds. The first one was the regular build in which the player will start from the beginning and can level up to level 20 by progressing by exploring and fighting. But the issue with this is that if at any time the player closes the game or goes back into the menu, the game will reset, losing all the progress. For this, I created the second alpha. This one has the training level and the cube amount maxed out from the beginning. So if the player wants to try the demo but doesn't want to redo all the leveling work, it can pick up the already maxed out version. Because I don't want this video to be even longer than it already is, because it will get even more boring if you prefer the short type videos, and apparently not just the blue guy needs to sleep, but so do I. On the next video, I will be showing you the playable demo of the game. I think I will make a complete edited playthrough so you guys can properly see how the gameplay, exploration and leveling looks like. Even if the entire world crafting and customization part is still missing from the game, what actually will be an important part of the appeal of the game for many people, I will still be able to play through the demo to show you how the other parts of the game look like, even if they are still in a very basic state. If you guys have any comments, please leave it down there. I will be happy to read your thoughts. So that's it for this week. Bye!